Hello, and welcome to Unco, a podcast about what's unusual in tech. I'm your host, Timothy Buck. In this week's show, I called Sonya Mann. She's a staff reporter for Inc. and an all-around interesting person. We talked about machine learning-powered personalized hair products, living in San Francisco, the FinTech company she finds most interesting at the moment, and more. If you'd like to hear more episodes like this, help me keep the show around by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/uncofm. Hi, Sonya. Nice to have you on the show.
Well, hello there. Thank you for having me.
So you are a staff reporter for Inc., is that correct?
Yep.
And what do you typically write for them?
My beat is a little bit all over the place. I write about technology, but that's, I write about the business side of technology is what I usually say, because I don't care about like gadgets at all. And I write about both like the big tech companies that have huge effects on the whole market, and then also about startups that are doing interesting things or innovating in one way or another. So it's a broad but pretty typical tech reporter beat, I guess.
Yeah, I was looking through the Inc. website just to see some of the things that you'd written recently. And like the most recent thing was about the Dropbox IPO. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like that's a typical...
that was like a dumb timeline video that I made. I wouldn't even classify that as writing.
Oh, okay.
That's just like one of those things they make us do.
Yeah, I was just looking at the titles of the things that you published. Yeah, and then another one was about how a shampoo company is using algorithms to give you perfect hair. What was that about?
So that was actually an assignment for our Best Industries package. Which is a package in the context of something like Inc. is just a collection of stories about a given theme that we typically they'll usually all come out at once. And so Best Industries, the concept of it is here are these sort of emerging areas that are ripe for new entrants. And so Inc. is nominally a small business magazine and we're oriented towards entrepreneurs. So kind of the idea is like, here are areas where, you could get in on the ground floor and have like a successful, exciting company. So I profiled, or I did the beauty tech category. And Function of Beauty is the name of the startup that I profiled, which is they do personalized hair care, where you answer a quiz with all your preferences about like how you want your hair to be essentially, and then they have like these base formulas for like some of the more common components, but everything else like the process, they mix like an individual shampoo formula or shampoo and conditioner or one or the other for you, and it's one of a kind, and then it's the process of mixing all the the process of mixing all the final ingredients is automated. So it's a pretty cool application of machine learning, to use the sort of like buzzwordy way of describing it. And it's also that kind of like personalization at scale is something that we haven't really seen before. And, now that there's like 3D printing and other like automated fine scale manufacturing, you can do stuff like this, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is super interesting. It actually reminds me of another company that my wife sent me a link to, Care of. I'll send it to you in Skype. And they do, it's not quite as in depth, but what they do is you fill out a similar like quiz type thing, and then they tell you what vitamins you should be taking based on what you filled out. And then they send you like an individual pack with just those vitamins in it.
There's another company along those lines that I can't remember the name of, that is constantly advertising to me on Instagram and Facebook,
That's
is
probably
trying to
how
get me
she
to take
found
their
it. Yeah.
supplements or whatever.
It's a cool idea, especially for like, well, of course they have like really good branding and a nice, looking
Yeah,
packaging and
it reminds me of like what like Trello and Slack did for software. There's that sort of that aesthetic, but carried over into sort of more normal consumer goods.
right. I think that concept is really interesting of all of these, like you wouldn't think of hair care or vitamins as being something where it would be like super easy for a technical component to disrupt, but both of these things they seem like a good idea. Like I understand why people would want that. I think probably the hardest thing is getting the prices down.
Yeah, it's still definitely premium prices, especially so for vitamins or any kind of supplements. I have a lot of skepticism because it's not. I mean, it's some. I mean, some of the vitamins that they sell you are not even actually like bioavailable in the form of a pill. So you can take them and your body just is just like okay, and then processes them out. So it's
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, I don't know. It depends. I have a hard time trusting companies that are selling any kind of supplement thing or any kind of like supplement bundle thing. That said, I do take a multivitamin. I have no idea if it does anything at all. Um, it might. I started taking it just to see if it would have any effect on me, and so far it hasn't. So I don't know if we're gonna keep taking it or not.
Yeah, I don't take any vitamins or anything like this, and neither does my wife. So I think this is why she was like, I don't know what I would need to take even, right? And so she took the quiz and it gave her like a list of things. And so now we may take some of the ones from that list and just buy them ourselves because you can buy like a thing of like 100 of them for way cheaper than you pay this company. But the
Oh
concept
yeah,
is
that
really
makes sense.
interesting.
Yeah, I like the concept. And there are, I mean, my concerns about like vitamins don't apply to like hair care. It's pretty low stakes hair care. Um, Although, like, I do wonder how much of an effect the individualization actually has. Like, are people's hair really that different? Like I know there are a bunch of different types of hair, but like is it really different enough on an individual level versus like a population level?
Right.
Um I don't know.
Like
I really
they
don't
may
know.
really just have like 15 formulas and they just like point you into one of those and
So I did make sure to ask about that
oh,
actually
okay,
because
okay.
that occurred to me too. And there are companies that do that. But Function of Beauty specifically, and one of the reasons why we chose to highlight them and not, some other company, they actually do like custom mix every single bottle. And they calculated the number for me of like what the likelihood was of someone having the exact same answers on the hair quiz and thus getting the exact same sort of hair prescription, so to speak. And it was some like one in some very large number, just because it's a like multi-question or
Uh,
just because of the amount of questions. So I'm not sure. Like it could be that there are sort of like say 16 basic types and then like a lot of the rest of the customization is like the scent and like a glossening like additive or something. So it could be that they're not that significantly different, which is I think is kind of what you were getting at.
yeah, or it may come down to like the percentage of each thing. Like
Hmm.
like the base like the ingredients are the same, but how much is glossiness and how much is I don't know anything about hair care, but the percentage is if it's just
Hmm.
percentage based, they could very easily say like everybody's is completely different because they put slightly more of one ingredient in or something.
That is part of how they do it, yeah. Um, but I generally I like the idea. There's another company that does custom shirts. There are actually, I mean, a bunch of custom shirts like e-commerce startups. What is this one called? I can't remember. Uh, I'm just googling like custom shirts. This is getting me a lot of
I literally
God.
was
What is
just
it?
doing the same thing.
Yeah. Man, I can't remember, but it's basically so it's like a fitted. You can get a custom is probably not the tailored shirts. You can get tailored shirts. So either you can put in your measurements, or they have you answer a quiz, and the quiz is about sort of like the your usual t-shirt size, and there are a few things where they still want you to input the measurement, but other things they just ask you a bunch of questions about your usual clothing preferences and experiences, and then they calculate based on that. And they have so much data about the people who do input their measurements, and also just about all of their past customers, and what the correlations were between certain like tailoring preferences and certain measurements and such, that they're able to make a pretty good guess as to what your tailored shirt should be. Um, and they also they you can design a tailored. They have a sort of like WYSIWYG website builder style of thing, but for like making a custom tailored shirt. And there are like a zillion different kinds of collars and stuff that you can select. Um, but they found that like some people really like that. Some people are, want to do the sort of power user shirt experience, for lack of a better way to describe it. But some people just want to be told like this is reasonably stylish and reasonably comfortable, and they may still want the custom sizing, but they don't want to actually like make all the style decisions on their own. Which I guess is instead of having your wife dress you, now an algorithm will dress you.
Yeah.
Cool new feature.
That makes sense. There's a lot of companies out there around like what's the one that I use? I use one that just like sends me a box of clothes, and then
Is it Stitch Fix or a different one?
yeah, Stitch Fix. That's what I use. Yeah,
They went public relatively recently, or I guess it's been a little while now.
yeah. I remember reading about that, and I don't think they're doing quite as well since they went public. But I like the service.
Yeah. I got one Stitch Fix box, but I think I'm just like actually too picky for it. Like I have my preferences are too granular for it to handle.
Yeah, my first two boxes, I returned everything. And then like I like gave notes. I was like, no, I don't like any of this stuff, and this is why. And then they pair you with like the same stylist every time, and so then the next time this person sent me better stuff, and I was like, oh, I actually like three of these things, and now it's gotten better to where like I typically like what they send me. So
Oh, that's good.
yeah,
Maybe I just didn't stick with it long enough. I was annoyed because I gave them very specific notes of what I wanted like up front. Because just to give an example of one of my idiosyncratic things is I hate zippers. Zippers in pants I will abide because there's like not a good alternative. I don't want to use buttons or whatever. But zippers on like I hate wearing dresses that have zippers, or it doesn't make any sense. It's just like a weird kind of sensory thing, I guess. Um, and so I told them, no, like I don't want any dresses with zippers. Guess what they sent me in the first box? So I was like, come on, like you're not actually giving me the personalization that you promised. But it may be that, I'm just like more picky than they have the information to accommodate. Because I know the stylists are not like, physically picking out the clothes. So maybe they just like don't have information on which dresses have zippers or whatever. I don't know.
oh yeah, oh that's interesting.
In general, like personalization seems like a kind of a, I mean, you see this with content companies, or I guess Facebook wouldn't like for me to call them a content company, but they do a lot of personalization. Google does search results personalization. Um, and we're seeing that kind of move from pure software to all these like quote unquote tech enabled businesses. And I'm excited to see more of that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I also think we all think we are very different, but in reality, there's probably only like a handful of hair types and needs. Same thing with what we watch. Like there are probably hundreds of groups, but really, we're not that different from the rest of the world.
I think I guess the way I would express it is that we are different, but that often the differences don't matter.
Oh yeah.
Like you can be a very different person in, a bunch of ways and still enjoy the same movies. Um,
Yeah.
I guess they're like the universals kind of can end up being more important than the differences, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But I think this depends a lot on the specific context.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's just I'm viewing it like at a really really high level of worldwide. I may have some weird thing about me, but there are probably hundreds of thousands of people who also have that weird thing, and we're all kind of in like different groups. So that weird thing, I may have nothing else in common with those hundreds of thousands of people, but every other weird thing about me is other groups. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like the combination of idiosyncrasies. Even though other people share the idiosyncrasies, when you combine them all, you're unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or at least reasonably close to unique.
Yeah. Something like that. At least I like to think that I'm unique.
Yeah, me too. What was I going to say? You reminded me of something. Now it's slipped my head. Sorry.
No.
No, I remembered. Okay, so like probably my favorite thing about the internet is that it lets you find so many other people who share your, unusual preferences or, interests, in a way that would be really hard if you were restricted to just, talking to the people in a certain geography. So, like that's the best.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I was in the Southeast for many years and didn't really know very many people in person who were interested in the same things in tech in the same way that I was. But I've made a whole lot of friends on the internet, and now I've moved out to San Francisco, and some of them live here, and we've become like in-person friends because of that. It's been really cool.
Mm-hmm. Did you move to San Francisco for work, or did the work come after moving?
Yeah, I moved here for work. I'd wanted to live here for a long time, just because of that. Just for I knew there were people here that were interested in the same things as me, and I'm sure there are in basically every major city. But I was in South Carolina, and then I was in Houston, and in Houston, you would think that there would be a lot of people like that, but it was just hard for me to find that community. Everyone there was like in oil and gas, or and I'm sure there's a lot of people who work in like I was working at HP then, and I don't know. Here is just completely different. You meet somebody at coffee, or I don't know. You just run into somebody, and they're interested in the same things you are. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the sheer level of density of tech people is kind of incredible. So how long have you been living in the city then?
A year and like a couple months, so relatively new.
What do you think of it?
I like it a lot. I think there's definitely downsides to the city. I mean, it's super expensive. There's, everybody talks about the downsides of the city, but I think my wife is an illustrator and graphic designer, and so I think for both of us, to some extent, we've been able to find people like us, and we feel very at home here, more so than I have anywhere else I've lived. So that's been really good.
That's kind of that's why people move here. So I actually am one of the less common people who grew up in the Bay Area, although I've never lived in San Francisco itself. I am the things that are frustrating about living around here frustrate me a lot. There are definitely also good things.
Yeah, it seems like the people who grew up here have a more negative view of San Francisco than the people who are just moving here.
I guess probably because we were exposed to what it was like before. I mean, I'm not one of the people who blames tech. Like, I think tech has been a hugely positive thing for the Bay Area. Like, we have such a vibrant economy, which is, wonderful. Really, I mean, I this is such a like circle jerk topic of conversation, but got the goddamn housing policy.
Yeah.
We need to build more houses. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm always interested in what people's impressions are like who, came from somewhere else because that, obviously I don't have that perspective myself. So
Yeah, I think for me and my wife, it was just easier to find a community of people here. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really important.
yeah, it is. Like you said, that's that kind of psychological feeling of being at home or how like having found your place is important. Like it matters. Community, yeah, in general, community matters a lot.
Yeah, and so I think for us, like, despite the downsides that we all know about, that was more important. And so because that has been good, we've been really happy here.
Well, that's excellent. It's funny. My partner and I have been sort of thinking about like doing the opposite thing, where we don't have an immediate term plan yet, but we want to move out of the Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
Like, partially because I mean, like, so I can work from anywhere. And my job is portable, and I'm our main breadwinner right now, anyway. And he hates cities. Just in general, does not like cities. And I've, never lived anywhere else, so I feel like I should at least get the experience of living outside of the Bay Area and try it out. And like you said, it's so expensive. So, since my job is portable and my skills are portable, the ability to make like a Bay Area level salary, but living somewhere with a much lower cost of living is very tempting.
Yeah.
I was looking at property in like the South and the Midwest. Like I was looking at Little Rock, Arkansas, and I was like, I could buy a house. Like that's something that I've never, like I've just never thought I would be able to do. Although, so my parents own their house here, so I guess I'll like eventually, years and years from now, have a way to own property in the Bay Area. But, it's not like something that I ever thought I'd be able to do on my own. So it's, I don't know, it's just amazing to think about that as a possibility. So I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I do think that the density of techness in the Bay Area is very, very valuable.
Yeah, I think, there's definitely pros and cons. I think like the South and areas like that have much cheaper cost of living are really nice for, like, if you have a good job, you can be very, very comfortable there in a way that you can't here. Like, like we are not going to buy a house in the Bay Area anytime soon, right? Like it's just impossible. It's so expensive. But yeah, like if we were living in the South right now with our current salaries, we could, buy a house and a more house than we need and have it paid off very, very quickly. It's mind blowing. Like, there's a couple really good cities there. Greenville, South Carolina. We actually lived there before. It's a really good city, and we were paying $800 a month for a 3-bedroom house to rent.
Oh my God, that's like painful for me to hear.
Like with parking and like a yard.
A yard.
Yeah.
Do you have kids?
No. We were recently married, but still.
Not having kids makes San Francisco a lot easier. And I think that's kind of what has been driving people out. I think some of the like sort of headlines about people leaving in droves are overstated, but there are people leaving, and I think a lot of them do it because, they want a yard for their kids.
It makes sense.
It's hard to do here.
Especially if you can get work in and be paid at Bay Area salaries, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like there's a difference between like growing up in a small town and your only opportunities are in that small town, versus like having been in a large city and grown a resume and opportunities and connections based on that city, and then moving to a small town and like taking advantage of the arbitrage there of being paid higher and having low like cost of living. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it does. It totally does. I have a friend who has done exactly that. He lives on like a literal farm. Like he runs a farm essentially, and he and his wife are getting closer and closer to living completely off the land. Like he raises pigs, he raises sheep. I know he also grows crops. I'm not sure exactly which crops, but he also works as a developer. So like he does contract, software development, and that's like his main income. But it's all oriented towards like fueling his farm life and making it more sustainable. He's probably an outlier. Like that's a little bit more extreme than most people. But he has explicitly said like he lived in Boston before he moved out and established his farm, and he says that like it was exactly that arbitrage, like you said, like you develop the connections and the network when you're living in a city and working in a sort of normal way, and then if you're a hustler, that can enable you to go be independent later because you have those connections.
yeah, and I could see us doing that too, but having like my family or even my college, like we had no connections to the tech scene at all. And so like having worked in it sort of in the South, like I was at a startup in the South and then I was at HP, and you kind of start to build connections there, but they're just outside of like, you're only basically meeting people in like a handful of companies. Whereas out here, it's been crazy to just like run into somebody or somebody's friend who comes to dinner with you and they work at Airbnb or they're at Facebook or and it's cool just to meet those type of people and learn from them and build those friendships. And then, 5 years from now, if I've built that, and especially with remote work becoming more and more and more common, I think that, that will probably be something that we'd be interested in doing.
And it also, I mean, it just depends on your preferences also, right? Like what different people value different things. Like some people really like living in big cities, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Because I definitely know people who are like, I would never ever move out of, insert whatever city they live in. Like I know a lot of people feel that way about New York.
Yeah. Yeah. Right now, we're definitely not interested in moving. I love the whole like walk outside and you're right by, 10, 15, 20 restaurants all within like 2 blocks of your house. And that whole thing is really nice.
There's a top-notch selection of coffee shops in general.
There's like, I'm trying to think, there's probably 7 coffee shops within like a 5-minute walk of my house.
And like, in addition to all the independent coffee shops that are, like cool and have like absurd like $5 lattes, there's also there's like a Starbucks every block downtown, which is surreal, just how many of them there are, because I always marvel at this, like how is there possibly enough demand to support all these Starbucks, but apparently there is. Another like benefit of living in a city like that, like really a big city that is like a business destination, is that it's a destination. Like people come through. I've been able to meet so many internet friends just because they like ended up in the area, for work or, for fun either. It's a destination city because it's so happening, I guess. And that, I mean, that is also part of the kind of density effect.
Yeah, I completely agree. I after college, I basically didn't spend that much time with anyone I went to college with until we moved here, and probably like 6, 7 times now since we've been here, somebody that we knew from college has flown in. We've, went and got dinner with them, or they've stayed with us, or whatever. And that's been really cool. People that live all over the country, all over the world, that we never would have gone out of the way to meet up purposefully, but they just, sent me a message. Hey, I'm going to be in San Francisco. And that just happened yesterday. Somebody is going to be coming in the next few weeks. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And this also has it also happens with culture. Like effectively any band you want to see is eventually going to come through San Francisco.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Even like weird, obscure metal bands that, my fiance likes come through San Francisco.
Again, we haven't been here that long, so I don't know if we can call ourselves San Franciscans, or if even anybody says that, but but we like it here.
I hereby grant you permission to call yourself a San Franciscan.
Okay.
Because gatekeeping is dumb.
Okay.
Oh yeah, if you really want to get people riled up, try calling the place Frisco and see how they react.
Oh yeah.
People have very strong opinions about that.
We noticed that after maybe like a month here, that that people who live here or around the Bay Area call it San Francisco, SF, or the city. And then
I think the city is probably the most common.
Right. Yeah.
In
definitely.
just like conversation. That probably happens like in any sort of metropolis that has a big like anchor city, that it just gets called the city. Like I'm sure that happens in like Jersey, for example. I'm sure people say the city and mean New York.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But nobody, like you were saying, nobody calls it Frisco here.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Well, what's funny about it to me is that it's not just that no one says that, but people will get upset if you say it, which is weird. Like, why? I think there's just a sort of like trying to like police outsiders, I guess. Like, no, that's not right. You're not allowed to. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what motivates that reaction.
Yeah, that's funny.
What else was on your list? What else should we talk about?
Yeah.
Now that we've done a very long digression about the Bay Area.
Yeah, so I saw in your list of topics that you tend to write about, I think you had a tweet about it, that you write about FinTech. Who right now is the most interesting FinTech company in your mind?
I would argue maybe Robinhood. They're really like blowing up with all their investment offerings, getting into cryptocurrency. So I'm really interested in cryptocurrency, just because I tend to be kind of like techno-libertarian, and also, there's been such an explosion of interest and investment. So that's an area that I really like also. I don't know, do you have like a favorite fintech company, or one that you think is, making waves in an interesting way?
Yeah, I think Robinhood's a really good example. I downloaded their app at the very beginning, and I think I don't really use it that much because I don't care to like control my investments at that level of detail. But I think as they expand into more and more things, they have an interesting approach in like removing fees and making it really simple in the app in a way that most other fintech startups I haven't or investment type apps I haven't seen them do as good of a job. Are they growing very quickly? I haven't really looked at their financials.
They're growing just gangbusters. Like I think they are now the largest brokerage.
What? Like period, like in the world?
By by some measure, let's see, Robinhood largest. Let's see what Google tells me. Yeah, I don't know. They're really big. I don't want to falsely say that they are bigger than they are, but they're like very, very big. And they just have like a ridiculous amount of users, I think. Like, I'm sure their assets under management are smaller than, some of the other firms, but they have just so many accounts, because it's all millennial friendly, it's easy to sign up, the no fees thing people like. Probably the concerning thing about Robinhood is that it encourages like people to be financially irresponsible. Like, day trading is essentially gambling, like gambling with a little bit more information. And Robinhood, is kind of all about doing that. Their cryptocurrency rollout, they did a ridiculous commercial that was, the whole like Lambo to the moon kind of rhetoric.
Yeah.
I guess I tend toward, like thinking that we should let people be irresponsible if they want to be, but there are some ethical concerns there. What do you think?
Yeah, honestly, I probably need to read more about that. I know, I know when I was using the app originally that they had a certain number of trades you could do a day. And if you passed that, then you had to it said they don't allow day trading, and that you would have to, you'd have to register as a day trader, which is some legal thing. And you have to have a certain amount of assets and all this craziness. So maybe that changed. That was probably a couple years ago.
I don't know. I don't use the app myself, because, well, both for ethical reasons, I can't own stocks individually. All my money is in index funds. But also just because it's not financially smart thing to do. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they still have that limitation, because I'm not using the term day trading in a technical or legal sense, I guess. I just mean
yeah,
trading on a daily basis, I guess.
Yeah, it makes it easy because it's so easy to say, oh, I'll put $100 into this, or I'll put $1,000 into this, and then I can take it out whenever I want really easily. That I guess that's more what you're talking about. But I think day trading legally means you're trying to make money off of the margin between 5 minutes ago and now.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so there's day traders who they're that risky, where they think some announcement's going to happen, and they're going to bet that between now and when the announcement's finished, it's going to go up or down 5 cents. So they'll put $100,000 in and then take it all out. It's crazy. Yeah.
Finance is mind-bogglingly, a lot of it seems from the outside just completely crazy. I find that world fascinating, though.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I actually work at a finance company. It's not anywhere in this world at all. We just give loans for green energy improvement, so it's kind of a different thing. But because of that, I've been able to talk to a lot of the people who work there, who've worked in all these other companies, and it's a crazy world.
Yeah, I have a long reading list of all the many expose books about what it's like to work on Wall Street. It's just fascinating. There's a really good newsletter that's part of Bloomberg View, written by Matt Levine, who used to work at Goldman Sachs as doing something or other. And now he writes, the way I would describe it is that it's half finance business analysis and then half just comedy. He basically riffs on the news, and he's both very insightful, but he's also really funny. So it's probably one of the best business reading experiences on the internet, or at least that I've encountered. I don't know. Do you read Ben Thompson's Stratechery or anything like that?
Yeah, I read Stratechery, and I read The Information, and I read Above Avalon. Although I think all of those except for the information, I've actually canceled my subscriptions to, just because it was too much stuff to read in one. So I read like the free version, the free article from Stratechery now. I think my full subscription just ended. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I think people are going to hit subscription fatigue, like both financially, just because it can add up, especially if you're subscribing to something like The Information, which is like a gazillion dollars.
They have a under 30 tier that's like half the price.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's what I have.
That helps.
Yeah.
That seems smart of them also. I wonder if they also have like student discounts.
Yeah, I don't know. I would assume so. The under 30 one's interesting because you just if you say you're under 30, then for the next 5 years you'll get that price. Like no matter, even if you're 29 today, for the next 5 years you'll get the under 30 price.
Huh. I guess it's probably just simpler to administrate that way.
Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that seems like a smart play. I wonder if, I'm sure like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have done similar things.
Yeah, I don't know. I know like in college, it was so cheap to have the Wall Street Journal. Like, I feel like it was like $10 a year or something crazy.
Oh, yeah, that's super cheap.
Yeah, I remember it was really low. And so I had it and I read it. And then I graduated and I was like, I can't pay $80 a month for this. So
yeah. Never mind. Yeah. Yeah, it's something I feel bad about because I hate I think the incentives of like ad-based journalism are terrible.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be like economically rational for me to, at this point, to pay for really any, like, because the information is fungible, right? Like I can get the information about the news anywhere. It just honestly, like, I think most of the news I just kind of absorb through osmosis, like on Twitter, and like I follow Tech Meme and that just like feeds me all the information. um and a lot of the time I don't necessarily care about actually reading the article. I just want to know what's happening. And I feel bad about this because, I want, I want the businesses that invest in reporting to continue to exist. But, why it just doesn't make sense in terms of an ROI. It's sort of like an ROI calculation for myself, for me to spend, like you said, like $50 a month on a collection of different subscriptions when the information makes its way to me anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That makes complete sense.
I guess I'm more willing to pay for like analysis or, I don't know, like I subscribe to some people on Patreon and stuff. For a long time I paid for Stratechery, and then, so I actually worked with him a little bit, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was, by now, like a couple of years ago, but, I sort of like quasi interned for him, just doing some like categorizing his backlog, because he had never done any like tagging or organizing of his everything he'd written. So I was doing that for him, and he comped my subscription, and I think has probably forgotten that he did this, so it's just like run in perpetuity. Yeah.
Well, that's nice. That's cool. I think
weird perk.
He's definitely worth reading. I enjoyed subscribing. I just got to the point where, like, my morning, as I have more and more stuff, like more and more actual work I'm supposed to do at work, as as I'm gaining more responsibilities and there's less free time at work, I can't do it. So I have to read outside of work, which that lowers my it's like there's only so much
time.
Yeah. And I think that's why the information for me, I feel like if I just read that, that I'm fine.
Well, the whole like design of their business is about having a really high signal to noise ratio, right? Like they are not
Yeah.
about like putting out a bunch of stories every day. It's about like only delivering what they really think is valuable.
Yeah, so they do like I actually stopped using tech meme because the information started briefings. So it's basically tech meme, just inside the information and fewer articles. So like they'll publish like 2 actual articles a day, and then they'll have maybe like 5 or 6 briefings that they just send out in an email at the end of the day, and it just is like the headline, 4 or 5 sentences they've written about it, and then a link to whoever wrote the original article about it. And so I feel like reading their 2 articles and then just like skimming through that briefing email is enough for me to be like up to date on what's going on, and I'm not going to miss anything big. So that's why for me it's been worth it.
Yeah, that's smart because that's sort of like a, you're going to be informed, and that you don't have to like worry about actively following the news or anything. And then, if you're like really interested in a particular thing, you can dive deeper into it if you want to.
Yeah, it's just like even tech meme. There's just
Oh,
so
tech meme
much.
is like an avalanche. Yeah.
It gets overwhelming, and so then I think that is part of like the information's pitch is we're gonna filter out as much of this other stuff as we can so that you only see what you need to see.
Yeah, that's I think that's part of Jessica Lesson's like whole philosophy is, let's make it high impact instead of high volume.
Yeah, I was thinking back to your question about interesting fintech companies, like who I thought was interesting, and the one that came to mind was actually Stripe. They're not as I don't know. I guess they're not really like sexy, but I think they have a really bright future. Like I've been like studying into their CEO a little bit, and it seems like he has.
He's incredible.
Yeah, it seems like he really knows what he's doing, and they're kind of doing what Amazon did, and they're trying to build this like infrastructure layer for the internet, and if they can succeed in that, then they could become a massive company.
Yeah, I think you could argue that Stripe is like the Visa or like the first data of the future, essentially. The internet native version of all those payments companies. Although a lot of them they work with to like actually manage everything. Stripe is a very impressive company, and I think Patrick Collison is a really impressive person. He strikes me, he kind of reminds me of Sam Altman, actually, which makes sense because he went through YC. Stripe went through YC. But just like the combination of being like a very incisive like business mind, but also just a really humane person. I always get this impression of like, I guess like kindness from him.
Yeah.
And I guess that's largely his public persona, who knows, but
Right.
yeah, I think I agree with your assessment of Stripe.
Yeah.
And they've also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say they're also doing like interesting, more experimental things. Like, are you familiar with Stripe Atlas?
Yeah. It's like the startup helper thing.
Yeah, so it's basically like, I think, I was going to say LLC as a service, but I think it's actually they register an S Corp. But it's like all the sort of legal hassle of like getting a company rolling as a legal entity, that as a service. So you basically just like give them your information and then they, make it all happen. And I forget what the fee is, but it's lower than paying your own lawyer. And so that's like a really interesting idea and just a cool experiment, I guess. Who knows if it's going to end up being like a robust part of their business, but like that's the kind of interesting thing that they do.
Yeah, I think that's cool too, because if that works and if people regularly are using that, it'll tie them right into using Stripe for payment, and it leads into their other business model.
Yeah. So I suspect that we'll see more services like that from them, where it's just like, if I recall correctly, their motto is growing the GDP of the internet.
Yeah.
And that, like, there are ways for them to do that tie into payments, but still go beyond payments. So I think they're definitely a company to watch. Also, this is just me speculating, but they're probably well placed to IPO in the next year or so. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they did it this year, actually.
Yeah, so I actually listened to the founder speak at the Information's conference last year. So the Information does these like events in San Francisco and New York, and I think Seattle too, like a couple times a year. And part of your subscription is you get to go to those for free. And so Patrick spoke at one of those, and he actually talked about that specifically. And he said, I don't have like the quote in front of me or anything, but he basically said they don't think they're anywhere close to IPOing. And maybe that's just what you always say before you make the decision. But their view is that because what I'm trying to remember, because like 8% of payments actually happen on the internet, that they're not even close to like to even like scratching the surface of the potential of the company. And so they're going to keep it private until they feel that they've done that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they've raised a bunch of VC money, so maybe they just, it's probably not like capital is not a constraint. Yeah, and they could go back to the table if they wanted to. I bet.
And they've been profitable for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Like,
so
like actually profitable, or like we're not counting our marketing expenses and stuff?
I don't know. He said like, I think he said profitable. Again, this was like 6 months ago.
That's impressive. Well, then, yeah. I mean, why not stay private forever? Effectively, I guess the investors will want them to go public eventually, but they probably have, a long amount of leeway.
I'm Googling to see if it's actually profitable. I don't know. I could have just misinformed our listeners, but I think they are.
Listeners, please Google.
Yep.
Do your own Googling, your own due diligence. Yeah. Yeah, something I find myself saying a lot is that I have like approximate information. So I'll have sort of like, I'll vaguely remember something, but not exactly remember it. So lots of caveats, just like, I think it's like this.
I completely understand. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So there's a question that I always end the shows with, which is, what is one thing that you find unusual in tech right now?
Unusual in what sense?
Yeah, so it's super broad, and the name of the show is unco, which is a word that means like unusual. So it's just
I didn't know that was where the name came from.
Yeah. So anything, and it's different for the type of like I had a designer on recently, and he ended up focusing on like what's unusual for designers right now in tech, and so whatever you want to take it as.
Something that I think is unusual is that there are two narratives about hiring in tech, and they are diametrically opposed. There's both um, people saying that it's a really tight job market and people saying that they're like struggling to get a job and that there aren't enough jobs. And it could be that, I've seen people float the idea that, there's a really tight job market for experienced engineers, and then a really like difficult to get a job. What is the opposite of a tight job market? Difficult to get a job in market for like junior engineers. Do you have thoughts on that? You sound
Yes.
like you might.
So I think it's definitely like really competitive to get in. But then once you're saying it as somebody who was working like in tech, but not in this like community. But then once I moved here and like I've only been here a year and a half, but I am like reached out to 3-4 times a week now that I live here, and I've had a handful of jobs that, were in tech, and I'm, getting at like 5 years experience or whatever. It's just enough where like now it's kind of the other way around. Whereas before I was like applying, to get a job, I would apply 100 places and then like 3 of them would respond. Right. Now it's like I have a job that I like and I'm getting reached out to constantly. So I think that, and I'm not even really like, I just have 5 years experience. So I think it probably is even more so like further up you go if you have, like 20 years experience in some specific type of, in like a high level of development or product management or, anything like that. If you have that much experience, it's going to be hard to find people who are willing to take those jobs.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. That reminds me of the general adage that it's much easier to get a new job if you're currently employed. I think it's like a similar effect. And I guess that's probably what we're seeing, which is, I'm sure, like it's so frustrating when you're first breaking into the job market, trying to get a job. And like, I know that I definitely worked shitty jobs. And although my work history is kind of weird because it was mostly freelance, so I've like bounced all over the place. But yeah, it's the early career sucks, and then it seems to get better. Like I know that my work life has definitely leveled up from where it used to be.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think like entry level, you don't really know what you want to do. You think you do kind of, but you don't really know what you want to do. You don't really know what it's like to work for a company. And I don't know. I think like, and I'm sure this is probably like, look, 10 years from now, I'll look back and be like, I had no idea.
My poor naive self.
Yeah, I'm sure. But like versus 5 years ago, I definitely have much more of an idea of what I want to do with my life and the types of like companies I would want to work for and the types of roles I would even take. And so that that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that there's no other way to learn that except for experience. Like no one can really tell you what it's like to actually be in the working world.
Yeah, right. Or they try to, and you're like, it just doesn't click for some reason. So would you say that this is a tech specific like phenomenon where, or is it true in journalism and in other areas as well, where like it's harder to get a job when you're young and then easier as you get more experience?
I think that's probably true in general, but perhaps it's exaggerated in tech right now because it's such a hot sector and there's so much overall demand, and there are new companies forming all the time, and a lot of like fast growing companies. So I guess I'd say I think in general, yeah, that holds true. And then in tech, it's especially true right now, just because it's such a growth area.
Yeah, I find it interesting in tech too that like the pace of growth, like title growth in employees is just so much faster. Like going from, even compared to like older tech, like HP or whatever. Like at HP, to be like a senior product role or to be like a senior developer or I don't know, like a architect or whatever, those people had like 15 to 30 years experience at the least, you know? And then I come out here and it's like, oh, you know, I just became a senior product manager, and there are a lot of other people like on my team and other companies I know that they're like moving into director roles at 27 or 28, and it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Accelerated.
Well, that's one of the things that I actually really like about this industry is that if you are good and you're hungry, there's effectively no limit on what you can do. And, you know, it rewards. This is obviously not true of every company, and probably most companies are dysfunctional in one way or another. So I'm not saying that it's like a utopia of talent or a meritocracy or whatever. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for people who have that sort of get it done energy to them.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's really exciting as somebody who like wants to work hard. It gives me a lot more motivation to do my best at work. Whereas if you go to a job and you're like, I'm going to get a 3% raise and I'm going to be here. Like my boss has had the same job for 10 years and doesn't want to go anywhere. So there's like no upward momentum possible. Like why put in the extra hours? Why, like, I don't know, why make sure that your presentation is perfect when it doesn't actually matter? Like it's not going to affect your pay. It's not going to affect your title. It's not going to affect anything. But like in tech, it does.
Especially, and that can transfer from company to company also, because like someone you know is likely going to start a company and they're going to be thinking like, okay, who do I know who's reliable and good at their job? And, you know, maybe you'll end up, you know, moving to their startup. And I'm using the general you, although probably like I'm sure that you literally know someone who's going to go through this.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I was just thinking of like 3 people. So
yeah, it's just like that's the thing about networking, right? Like I was just thinking about this last night, that networking as presented by like LinkedIn or all the stupid like networking events that people go to, that is not a good form of networking and probably has very little value to most people. Like unless you're really good, like you're a really good salesman, you're like really good at introducing yourself to strangers, like probably most people don't get much value out of that type of thing. But just making friends with, like meeting a lot of people in social scenarios and making friends with them, if they're in the same industry as you, that pays off in ways that you can never predict. Just because they'll go do interesting things, or they know other people who are hiring, or, you know, like those kinds of non-transactional relationships end up with a much higher ROI than the ones that you're forming intentionally to network.
Yeah,
at least in my experience.
I completely agree. Yeah, so I feel like right out of college, I was like reading the books and like watching the stuff about how you need to network, and it just does not fit my personality type at all. And then you feel bad. You're like, oh, I need to be doing this. And then, and especially like in the South and in Houston, that you had to do that, right? And then I moved here and I was like, oh, I'm just going to like be a nice human and do life and like be interested in other people. And it's been so much more. I mean, I haven't like asked anybody for anything, but like I've just met so many more people and built actual relationships with people who work at really interesting companies or are starting interesting businesses or like are super talented and like they're going to go somewhere, and I don't know. I think that because it isn't transactional, like from the beginning, you're not thinking of it as like, oh, this is a person that I could like get something from.
You're just thinking like, wow, this person is really cool and I like hanging out with them.
Right. I like that so much more. Like
Me too.
That's cool.
Yeah. We should hang out actually, since we're in the same area.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, we could like grab coffee or I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I'm a big grab coffee person. I introduce everyone I meet to my favorite cafe.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, which I would say on the podcast, but probably most of your listeners don't actually live in San Francisco, so it's kind of irrelevant to them. So
Yeah.
sorry, podcast listeners.
Well, if you want to, where on the internet can people find you?
You can Google Sonya Mann, SonyaMann, and a bunch of stuff related to me will come up. The best place if you want to talk to me, and I'm very friendly, like please at me or DM me or whatever, is on Twitter, and my handle is Sonya Ellen Mann, SonyaEllenMann. And what about you, sir? Where can listeners find you?
Well, you can find Unco at unco.fm, and you can follow me on Twitter at TimothyBuckSF, and I write at timothybuck.me. So, yeah, that's where you can find me.
All right, cool. Well, Thank you for having me on the show. It was fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
All right, catch you later.
See ya.